Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Giovanni Nicosia. I'm a real estate attorney. Actually, I think it's 2 weeks, 26 years, been attorney in South Florida. I own a title called Springtown Escrow. And really since last October, we've been doing weekly classes on different real estate topics and have different speakers and stuff. And today we have Brian Morillo. He's given some classes before, which I thought were amazing. So that's why I invited him again. And today he was going to do a class on basically negotiations, right? That's what you want to talk about today?
Yes, sir. Negotiating. I want to make it as much interactive as possible. If you want to make any comments, questions throughout the entire presentation, that's the intention, especially when it comes to negotiations, because we all have different level of productions, different backgrounds, different experiences. And I want to hear if there was maybe one that you wanted to share and see if there was something different that you think that you could have done to avoid dealing with a bad negotiation. So a little bit about myself. I am a real estate agent like yourself here in South Florida. I'm located in Broward. I've been doing this for I'm on my way to a decade now. I can't believe it. I'm 31. I've done a little over 400 transactions. At the beginning of my career, I worked a lot with buyers. Now I'm more on the listing side. And my niche is investors. I work with investors with off-market properties, also helping sell their flips, some wholesaling here and there. And I grew up my business out of open houses. I did a lot of open houses at the beginning, a lot of face-to-face interaction. So I do feel that I've done a little bit of everything, but my niche now, again, is listings, investors, and a lot of networking.
Since this changes went into effect, let's say August 17th, because I know you do mostly work with listings. Have you worked with any buyers and had any issues?
It's funny that you ask. Yeah, like a week after the change got in effect, I signed on my first buyer after the change, and no issues at all. You know what's funny? I saw a post from Ricky Carruth. I don't know if you know him. He's kind of like an industry leader. He's always posting content, and he said that what he's feeling nationwide from comments and feedback from agents is that it's creating all the opposite. Buyer's agents are getting compensated more. And it happened to me too. I signed on my buyer and I signed it up for 3%. He said yes to the 3%, and I told him and explained the situation. I'm gonna try to negotiate a concession for you, so you get to pay the least, if not nothing, out of that 3%. But I'm secure at 3%. I'm literally gonna take him out later today. But I'm secure at 3%. So if you think about it, I'm no longer depending on whatever the listing agent of that property that I find is willing to pay me. I already locate my commission. So it makes total sense when I hear that nationwide, agents are actually getting paid more, buyer's agent, which is crazy. Everybody was freaking out. But if you know how to handle the conversation, that's what's gonna happen.
Let me ask this: was this somebody, a new person, a referral, somebody you worked with before?
It was a personal referral, but it's tricky because it was a tricky first situation for me because he's looking to buy and at the same time sell. So I had to literally have a lot of money conversations with him, because the way that I'm approaching it is I went to his house to talk about the listing, to secure my commission on the listing side, and then I had the conversation about paying commission on the buyer side. That's a second commission conversation. And then in the same table, I had the conversation about paying me a commission for looking a house for him. So 3 commission conversations at the same time. So it's not easy, but if you get to explain the whole process the right way, you're getting paid either way. But those are great questions. I'm curious at the end to hear what had been the experience for everybody. But what I want to talk about today is negotiating the deals. It's already hard enough, especially after the changes, to get a listing under contract, find a buyer, with the scarcity of buyers that are out there, and also to locate a property for your buyers. It's already hard enough. Now, it hurts me when I hear agents that they struggle when deals fall apart just because they didn't know how to handle this specific situation. You know that just finding the property or just finding the buyer is the very first step. You can breathe. You can breathe once you do it, because you know that, finally it's paying off. But that, it's probably 30% of the process. As you know, you still have to go through inspections, appraisal, loan contingencies, association if it has, like all these things, all these layers. And if you don't know how to negotiate and navigate those conversations, deals can fall apart like this. And I see it all the time. As a listing agent, I see buyer's agent literally walking themselves out of a property that I tell myself, if I were to be in their shoes, I would have known exactly how to handle the situation and locate and locked in this buyer. So I have some pointers here. I'm going to go through them, but I also, again, here and there, I'm going to open it up because I want to hear your comments and questions regarding those. The first thing is, what are those first questions that you ask us? What is that first interaction prior to going out? When you're working with buyers, before going out and showing properties, what is your process? If anybody wants to jump in and open their mics, what is your process? Let's say that you already spoke with your buyer, you know what they're looking for, and you already located a couple properties that they say that they want to see. What do you do? What is the first thing that you do?
Make sure they could afford it.
No, but let's say that you already went through the financials. You already did your buyer consultation, as you should do. Buyer consultation, you got them pre-approved. They saw some property online. They qualify for those properties and they want to see it. What do? It says, somebody in the chat, Suit says, connect with them, they sign the buyers and realtor contract. Yes, let's say that you already did that. Because the reality is, especially now after the change, you're supposed to have a buyer's agreement signed prior to showing them properties. So the first thing that I do is I call to make sure that the property is available. I know that it sounds simplistic, but a lot of agents don't do that. I call, and if you have an assistant, make your assistant call, because by the time that you make the appointment, you go show them, you don't know what conversations that agents are having, and you might be wasting time, precious time. So just a simple call to ask if the property is available. I mean, I don't leave properties active on the MLS unless they're available, but there's a lot of agents that do. Just a simple call. And that call also serves as a heads up, letting the other agent know that you're going to be showing the property. So that way, if they have a contract that they're considering, they will let you know up front. They will let you know, oh yeah, look, we have an offer. It's not worth it. You can ask, do I have time to show it? And all of that. Very basic, right? You show the property, and if your buyer likes the property, what is the next conversation? Once you show the property and your buyers like the property, what is your process?
Sue wrote something or a couple people wrote something in the chat. I don't know if you want to look at that. I don't know.
Submit an offer, perfect. But as far as the conversation, you just write up the offer and just send it over? Because if you do, I think you're missing out very important details when it comes to negotiation. I see that all the time, and a lot of agents, they do that. I don't know what it is nowadays that people are afraid of just picking up the phone and making a phone call to the listing agent. You shouldn't be fearful of that. We're people like you. Like, okay, you're gonna write up the offer. That's part of the process. But make a phone call for multiple reasons. The first thing is notifying them that you're gonna be sending that offer. Because again, at any point, they could have been already negotiating an offer or about to accept an offer. So at all times, you're letting them know they're going to be submitting an offer. You're saving yourself a lot of time, guys, and frustration and excitement from your buyers that they think that they already got the house. That's one thing. The other thing is, what are the questions that you ask? The very first question is, do you have any other offers? It's not illegal to ask that. Do you have any other offers? So, why do you want to know that? Because you want to find out as much information as possible. What are you competing with? You know what's funny too? I have agents calling me all the time asking, do you have any offers? And I say, yeah, we do. And they don't ask anything else. Oh, just wait for my offer. What does it helps knowing that there's other offers if you don't know what are the offers about? It could have been a very low ball offer. 100,000 short. All I said was yes. That's not enough information for you. It's not illegal to ask more information. The agent is not required to answer all your questions, to disclose all the information. But from your end, you can ask as many questions as you can, as you want. So the questions are, what are those offers looking like? And just let the agent talk. Don't assume. You don't know how many times. I can count probably at least a handful of times, especially when the market was a little bit more dynamic, that we had even more buyers than listings. You don't know how many times agent called me and said, Brian, your house is beautiful, my buyers liked it. I'm sure that you have a lot of offers already. And in my head, I'm like, no, I actually don't have any offers. But the agents are already assuming that. Why? I don't know. Because the house is beautiful? I don't know. I don't know where the assumption comes from. But never assume, oh, because I did an open house and it was a lot of people there, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna have offers in my inbox right away or at all, especially in this market. But I've had agents call me and assume and say, I'm sure that you have a lot of offers, and they don't even ask. Well, if you don't ask, I won't tell. I'll assume the same way that you do. I'll let you assume. And then what happens? When you assume, you ended up sending full asking, more than asking, and you don't even know that you could have get your buyers less property for less. Any questions so far? Any comments?
There's also contingencies that make a huge difference when writing offers that should be asked about. So if you call and you just ask, if you have offers, that's fine, but there's contingencies that make all the difference in the world.
That's amazing, because that's exactly the very next question. If they say yes, and some agents, they disclose more information than others, remember that technically you cannot disclose information unless your sellers authorize you. Your job is to represent your seller in their best interest. So if by any chance you have to disclose the information because you feel that it will help on the negotiation, you always can, if you have their authorization, right? Well, your next question, Chad, and thank you for bringing it up, will be, how is that other offer looking like? Sometimes they tell you, sometimes they don't. Let's say that they don't tell you. Oh, it's looking good. It's a good offer, I can say. Well, the next question is, other than the price, is there any other terms that are important for your seller? Those are contingencies. Why do you think that I asked that? And why do you think that I asked it that way?
At that point, the agent can just let you know what the seller is looking for, and you don't have to submit an offer just fishing, hoping that they accept it.
There's multiple reasons. Thank you, Kiara. That's very good. There's multiple reasons. One is that because the agent, exactly like that, can let you know exactly what it takes, and you don't have to guess, and you can write up exactly what they're telling you if it's reasonable and it works for your buyer. And you can save yourself time and headache of going back and forth with scratching contracts. You just write up a clean contract with whatever they tell you, if your buyer is okay with that. The other reason is that, and that have happened to me at least a handful of times. Guys, the number, the price is not the only reason why they will accept an offer. Sometimes time is of the essence. And timing, it's a more critical, important situation. Post-occupancy. Oh, my seller might need 2 more months. You don't know how many times post-occupancy have won me offers. A lot of times. Just because I took the time over other offers that other agents that were offering more. Just because I took the time and I asked that simple question. So in every conversation, whenever I'm representing the buyer, regardless of the market, regardless of the price point, I always ask those 2 questions, at least those 2 questions. Do you have any other offers? What are those offers about, if they want to give information? But the second question is, other than the price, is there any other term that your seller is looking to meet? 80% of the agents that I have conversations like that, they don't ask those questions. And that puts me, the listing agent, in a much better position to negotiate later on. Because you don't have the information, just simply because you didn't ask. So after that, I get all the information, I write up the offer, I send it over. If I already have the information and what they're looking for, I have an advantage. Most likely they're gonna accept the offer. Because if they tell me that they have this crazy buyer paying cash and is very competitive, I already know what are gonna be my offer looking like, right? So right before sending an offer, one thing that I do, and I hope that you guys do too, is running comparables. You gotta know what are you expecting to happen later on, especially if your buyer is financing, because you know that there's gonna be an appraisal as part of the process. Don't go blindsided. Now you don't run comparables to only protect your buyer from buying a property that is overpriced. You run comparables also to know what to expect. Let's say that the house is $50,000 overpriced. That doesn't mean that you're gonna go to your buyer and say, oh my God, that's $50,000 overpriced, don't even bother. No, you can always negotiate. Or if the buyers like the property enough, they can pay any difference. Don't try to act like attorneys or family member. It's not your money. Your job is just to lay down all the options, very clear and concise, and let them make the decision. With everything during the transaction, absolutely everything. Mr. Buyer, the house have a fire damage. These are the good things that we're gonna get because of that. These are the bad things that you can have to deal with. What do you want to do? Anything, guys. Your job is not to tell them what they're gonna be doing, if it's a deal or not. It's explaining the whole what are the options to their disposal. So you run comparables, and then let's say that there's a gap between what they're asking is and what do you think that the value is after you run comparables. How do you manage that conversation? Anybody wants to jump in and tell me? Let's say that the property, they have it listed for $550. Your buyer is interested, but you run your comparables and nothing has sold in the community for more than $500,000. How do you handle that conversation? Do you just submit the offer? What I do is call them. All of this is even before submitting an offer. Hey, Mr. Listing Agent, I was looking at the comparables and I see here that there's only 3 good comparables they sold for this much. Let me ask you, how do you guys come up with this price? Why do you think that I asked that way? For so many reasons too. The first one is, I don't want this agent to get offended.
I was just gonna say that I've seen so many times when people question someone and why they listed it, they get mad.
Yeah.
Instead of listening, they get mad.
Yes. And your job is not to get a confrontation, like even before gaining, that's not gonna open the doors for any negotiation. So you cannot create any type of friction or try to avoid creating any type of friction, especially if you don't even have a contract. So that's why you have to be careful, and that's why I asked that way. I'm curious, how do you guys come up with that price? And the reason I asked that way is it's an open-ended question to see what they say. And maybe they'll come up with a comparable that they didn't find, and maybe they're right. Most of the times they're not. But at least if I take the time and the decency to ask that way, I'm just being curious. I'm not creating confrontation there. Does that make sense? So that's the way that you ask, and they will tell you, no, because the seller just put it $10,000 in upgrades on the kitchen and this and that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, if that's where the negotiation starts, and then you explain, let's say that the seller do not want to come down more than $550 because they think that that's what it's worth. Well, you have to go back to your buyer and explain the scenario. Mr. Buyer, this is what's happening. These are the comps that I found. This is what I think the property is worth. So most likely, if we send an offer and get it under contract for $550, we may have, my concern is that we may have an appraisal situation. And if we do, we'll have to either negotiate, you will have to maybe come up with the difference. Let me know what you want to do. At the end, it's not your job to say, oh, look, it's overpriced, it's not gonna appraise, let's move on and look for another property. Don't do that. They already like that one. You gotta try to work it out. If the seller is motivated, and the buyer is motivated, you can put the deal together. Sometimes you may find a buyer that says, let's do it. I've had a lot of times where there's anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000 difference, and they're okay with taking the risk. They have the money in the bank account, they know that they maybe have to come up with some of that money, and they still do it. Sometimes miracles happen and the property appraise. Any questions so far? Any comments?
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Sorry,
Morillo.
Jack. I'm good. How are you? I just put it on the chat, but I know with all the recent change with NARS, how do you approach negotiating buyer agent compensation? How do you negotiate, buyer's agent compensation, given all the recent change with NAR?
That's a great question. At the end, it's about knowing how to explain the whole situation and giving them options to the seller and to the buyer. The changes right now, what it changes, in my opinion, is just the conversations. The way that I addressed that very first buyer that I said that I signed up right after the change, I gave them the options. And I said, look, this is the fee, it's 3%, but this is what happens. Most likely we could find a property, the property that we find that you like, they could be paying concessions in forms of compensation. So if we're able to get a property where I can negotiate 3%, then you don't have to pay me absolutely nothing. If they're able to pay 2%, then the remaining 1% then is coming out of your pocket. So it's just giving them options. In the very worst case scenario, the way that I see it is, the hardest and only conversation here that I'm gonna see how agents are gonna choose to handle that it's in the case that one, the buyer literally doesn't have more money to pay your commission, and you are choosing to take them out to try to get them a property that they're offering compensation. And if by any chance they fall in love with a property that is no paying commission and they're not able to pay you commission, then you will have to remove yourself from the equation. But the likeliness for that to happen is very little, especially if you know how to negotiate a commission for yourself. That's what we're talking about here, negotiations, right? So to answer your questions in summary, how do you negotiate commissions with the buyer? You explain, this is my fee. Now, Mr. Buyer, most likely what will happen is this. Any property that we find, they could be paying some sort of concessions that can serve as my commission during the transaction. I'm gonna try, as the top negotiator that I am, to negotiate the full 3%. In the very worst case scenario, maybe it will be 2%, and then you have to pick up on the remaining. Does that make sense? Does that answer your questions, Daggy?
Yes, Brian. Thank you.
That buyer, no problem. That buyer that I'm taking out this afternoon, he's very aware that we have an agreement that is 3%. He's willing to pay the 3% because he knows that I'm a top negotiator and I'm gonna get in on their contract. And I already explained that most likely what's gonna happen is that he won't have to pay that. Any questions so far?
Just curious on with your situation. Were any of the ones that you called saying they're not paying commission?
No, so far I haven't run into any of those.
Yeah. That's what I think. I think it's still gonna it's gonna still be the same. It's just a little more work, but it's still gonna be the same.
In my opinion, it's going to be the same. And you don't want to be that agent. And I think we talk about that in the other class. That is known in the market, in your local market, as the agent that doesn't pay commission to buyer's agent. Because if you get that reputation, then buyer's agents won't bring buyers to your listing. Simple as that. Dina.
What is the scenario? How does it work if the buyer's agent is only offered 1% and they're showing listings that are 2 or 3%? How does that work? How does that work through?
So technically, that the rule, what I understand that it says, and maybe correct me there if I'm wrong, Giovanni, if you remember, that you have to go by the lowest amount. If you already signed your agreement for 1.5, you have to go by that. That's my understanding. But I also heard other people saying that you can change that agreement as well. The way that I'm handling and I decided to do it, it's like, even if my buyer only have 1% to pay me, I tell them, sign the agreement for 3%, and I'll make sure that I negotiate the rest with the other side.
Yeah, basically, yeah, the most you can get is what you have on your agreement. So if your agreement says 1% and they're paying 3, you get 1 unless you're able to convince your buyer to modify your agreement where you get the full 3. But like Brian said, I think your goal is to get them to sign something where you're getting 3, and assure them that you're gonna do your best to make sure they don't have to pay, that you're gonna and also the client is the final say is with the client. If it turns out they find a property that's not paying any commission, they don't have to buy that property in reality, so we're still working for them, so I think you got to convince them to sign it where they're paying you the full commission, and of course you could deal with it later.
Yes.
Even if you're telling them verbally, like, listen, I promise you, if they're only paying me 2, I'll reduce it to 2. And they're like saying, well, put it in writing. When you're like, you guys explain to me, you can't by law, but listen, if we find a property that's only paying by 2, you don't buy it if I don't, modify this to 2.
Another question on the same thing. Say the buyer is offering 2% and the listing is allowing 3%. What happens to that 1%?
It goes along, in my opinion, it goes along with what Giovanni was saying. You have to buy the shortest amount, the 2%, because that's your agreement. It's the same money, it's just that it's structured differently in paper. That's why I'm talking to my buyer. Let's sign this agreement for a 3% commission. You're paying me 3% commission, right? Now, whatever I'm negotiating with the seller, it's gonna be concessions to you. The 3%, it's coming from you, Mr. Buyer, but I'm gonna negotiate concessions from the seller to you. And it's the same money, it's just that it's structured differently. Does that make sense? So in that particular example, and you say, what happens with that 1%? Well, you can negotiate that 1% in concessions from the seller to the buyer.
With that 1%, can the seller decide to withhold it and not give it as concessions, or is that not allowed?
That's the thing, because all this paperwork it goes to title company, and I believe the process is title company is going to request for that agreement from the buyer, and only whatever it says in that agreement for the buyer it's gonna be, if it's lower, that's what's gonna go as a credit from the buyer to you. The seller doesn't have any responsibilities here. They can offer compensation, but they don't have responsibility. That's what changed here. Before they had a responsibility. If it was on the MLS, it was because they agreed a commission with an agent, and the agent agreed a commission with sharing. But in this case, there's no responsibility until it's in writing. So even if they verbally say we're gonna offer 3%, it's whatever it's in writing. And if you already have an agreement for 2%, that's gonna go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, basically, whatever your agreement is what even if they're offering 20%, if your agreement's 1%, you're getting 1%, unless your client agrees to give you more. So that's, once again, it's so important that whatever you sign with your buyer, to make sure you're properly compensated. Because if you're like, just gonna like lowball yourself, that's what you're gonna get, truthfully.
And if you can modify that agreement, if you're telling me that you can modify that agreement, it's easier to modify down than modify up.
Exactly. Yeah, trying to convince a buyer, like, to say, hey, they're offering 2% more. Will you pay it to me? They're gonna say, well, why don't that just go to me? Why don't we reduce the offer? They're gonna say. Yeah, so going down is easier than definitely going up.
Brian?
I have another, hi, this is Priya. I have another scenario and I experienced this. I had an out-of-town buyer. I have a BBA with them for 3% compensation, but we went to a developer and, we wanted to offer on the property, but the developer was providing only 2% commission to realtors who've never sold in the area, and I'm one of the new realtors. How do you get around that? So I have a BBA for 3% with my client.
Yeah,
but the developer, for new construction, a developer changed their compensation to 2%. The 1% gap, I said, was to be compensated with the in the contract when we go to contract. But what are my rights, basically?
Again, it's whatever that agreement is. Whatever, if you're doing it the way that I suggest to handle it. You already secured your 3%. And if that,
Correct.
if that developer is only offering 2%, then you can go back to your buyer and say, hey, you only have to pay 1%. He's still winning. It's only 1% because he signed something saying that he was going to pay you 3, and now it's 2, and now it's 1. So that's the best way to handle it.
Well, I don't want them to pay that 1%. I want the developer to pay it.
So then you have to go and negotiate that with the developer.
Okay. So can I do that at the time of contract and say that it has to be provided as part of the seller's concessions to the buyer?
You can negotiate anything you want in a contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Brian?
think, just real quick, like, even if you, like, example, you could basically make your offer contingent on them paying you 3%,
Right.
and stuff. So everything's negotiable,
Perfect. Thank you.
No, this is a follow-up. So in this case, I think this new change technically is kind of a burden for the buyer, right? Because this is additional commission that they have to worry about paying in addition to closing costs, down payment.
I've been saying it since the beginning. The ones that are going to be affected the most here are the buyers. Are the buyers.
What
Now,
if you wanna offer your commission, like not full percentage, of course, but part of your portion of your commission as a rebate to the buyer? Is that something you negotiate with the seller? That 1%, let's say that 1% gap, there's no remedy, the buyer don't have money, the developer does not agree, but if you wanna rebate part of your commission, is that something you negotiate with the seller?
you can always give credits of your commission. Paying your commission and you want to give a credit to your buyers, you can do that.
Do you do that at the time of contract? Because let's say they're responsible for that 3%. At what point, like what part of the contract do you credit?
You can do that at any point in the contract, and then the title company they just do it a credit in the HUD at closing. So whatever amount you agree, and they will ask you for whatever proper paperwork, an addendum saying that you created this much to the buyer, and you can do it. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
We would normally ask for like a letter from your broker authorizing the credit, because technically the commission is the broker's commission. So you can't really just give away the commission without them authorizing it. So we would need like a letter from your broker authorizing it, and then we have no problem, putting the credit on the HUD.
I like this. A lot of the conversation is about how to talk to buyers and sellers. Depending on the production, maybe after the change was effective on the 17th, we're gonna be a month. If you don't have enough book of business, it's gonna take some time until you have to confront these conversations. That's why it's important before you meet your next buyer or seller to be prepared on this. So I hope that everybody gains some clarity. If not, after the call, I'm happy to discuss it and send you even some videos and content. This is something that, guys, we've been talking about for a while. And there's still, less than before, but there's still a part of this conversation that we are gonna figure out as things go. So, but in essence, all we have to do is just get more comfortable asking for money. The same way that we had to do it with listings, now we had to do it with buyers. So that's why it's important, the whole conversation, getting comfortable to asking questions. Make them sign a buyer's agreement. I used to do that when I was heavy on buyers. Before all this NAR settlement, I used to have them sign a buyer's exclusive agreement. Now you have to show your value for them to commit with you. If you don't see, and how do you show your value? It's by knowing how to articulate and how to negotiate and communicate. That's the way. So, but this that I'm showing you right now, about how to talk to the agents, is what I'm talking about. It's not just locating the property. Showing properties, like you can hire a service for that, to show properties. It's negotiating the deal, getting them $30,000 credit, price reductions, contingencies, all of that. Not get them in trouble. I currently have a deal where I'm representing the seller, but I have my seller is fighting $20,000 in escrow just because the agent didn't know how the deadlines worked. And I'm going to talk about that too. Extensions, how to negotiate extensions. But then let's say that you get it under contract, you already went through the conversation with the agent, something that when I was saying about if there's a discrepancy between the asking price and the comparables, then the conversation is, okay, listing agent, I think that the value is this much, you think that the value is this much. My buyer is financing, there's gonna be an appraisal later on. What will happen if the appraisal comes lower? Why do you think that I asked that? I'm setting the expectations, guys. Setting the expectations. They say, no, my seller won't sell for less than this, then that's a red flag. Because you might be getting your buyers into a property, paying appraisal, inspections, and all of that to find out something that you already knew. But if they say, look, I already had that conversation with my seller, then you have an idea and then you guys can take the risk. So, how to negotiate repairs? Do you negotiate repairs at all? I suggest on the buyer side or on the listing side, always negotiate. If you're going to negotiate any repairs, do it through credits. Don't go through the headaches of trying to negotiate actual repairs. If anything is broken, just get a credit and explain that to your buyers and your sellers why it's better and cleaner to do it through a credit. Any questions so far?
When you're stating that it's better to negotiate repairs as a credit versus the actual repairs, I understand as a seller, yes. If you're on the selling side, yes. But on the buyer side, how is it more beneficial to get a credit versus the actual item repaired?
Okay, well, two reasons. One, if you're getting a loan and the lender sees repair on the addendum, they're going to question what's wrong with the house. So it may affect them getting a loan. And two, my personal opinion, actually, like I just seen it yesterday, where they're asking for the moisture to be removed from the house, this and that. It's so that, how do you ever gonna know if you're gonna make the other person happy? I personally think as a buyer, get the money and fix it yourself. So, you know, you're gonna be happy because, you know, what if the seller does let's say it's electrical work and the seller just does it himself or herself, you know, and you don't think it's done right. That's why, you know, it's just it's better that, you know, because I always see that people argue how the work was done. So I think it just prevents fights later on. And once again, the happier your clients are, the better chance of you getting referrals. Because believe me, if the seller like goes and fixes it and they're still pissed off at the seller, they're going to blame you. And they're not going to refer you any business. So it's better to get it as a number and just do the work, you know, as I think yourself. And that's this way your buyer hires whoever they want. They know the work's being done properly and there's no issues, rather than, you know, pick, you know, apart everything the seller did and still not be happy.
It's the cleanest way for everything that you just said, for the loan contingencies, because remember, you have two people involved and they have emotions. You have the seller that think that their house, it's perfect, there's nothing wrong, or minimize those repairs. And then you have the buyer, which is super excited about moving into a house that thought it was brand new and then discover all these things. So like Giovanni was saying, they're not going to be, most likely, then a lot of the times they're not going to be happy with the repairs that the seller is doing, because the seller is just getting by because you know, they just want to get to closing. So to avoid all that drama and headache, and yourself coordination, because you have to coordinate a second inspection, maybe you have to coordinate going seeing the property. It's more layers to it. And then documentation too. If they say, yeah, that they were going to repair it this way and it's not to buyer standard, but it's still repair, and then they're pissed, if you don't structure the addendum the right way, it's me versus you and what I said versus what you said. So that's why it's easier to write up a line that says, seller agrees to credit $5,000 to the buyer, than seller agrees to repair these. How fast? How good? Who are they gonna hire? Are those contractors licensed? You know what I mean? It's way better in both sides, right? Now, sometimes if you are on the listing side and it's a very easy fix, You can, you can give the auction. Remember, give auctions to your clients. Even though I'm telling you that, try to push for credits and make them understand why it's better. It's still an auction. If they still want to ask for repairs and they still want to repair their house because it's cheaper, that's an auction. And they're the decision makers at the end. So, extensions, guys. How do you negotiate extensions? Let's say that the lender, in the case if you're working with the buyer, is taking longer than what you expected for multiple reasons, and you're approaching the loan commitment. How do you usually handle that conversation? Have you had to request a loan commitment extension before? Do you even know what a loan commitment is? Just to put it this way, if I've gotten agents in so many trouble just by a loan commitment. And what I mean by that is, if I'm on the listing side, I represent the seller. It's my job is to understand what are the seller's deadlines, or what are the seller's commitment, or what is the seller has to do to bind with the contract. But if you're on the buyer side, you have to remember the inspection period, the appraisal timing, the loan commitment, the closing. Those are timelines. If you don't deliver whatever you have to deliver in those times, your buyer is at breach of the contract. Loan commitment. Did you know that if you fail to deliver a loan commitment letter within the loan commitment period, your buyer is at breach? Do you know that? Because it's crazy to me. I'm sure that Giovanni, you can attest to that. How many agents get in trouble just by that one deadline?
Basically, when I do contract classes, that's what it's, deposits and timelines are what get realtors in the most trouble. I mean, it's like, really truthfully, if as a realtor you stay on top of those two things, you're going to be fine. But yeah, so many agents, a lot of times they think just because they're negotiating. I mean, it had to happen just last week. The inspection period ended Thursday. Friday morning, they send the cancellation. You can't do that. Once you pass the time, you're done. There's no extensions because you're negotiating or because you're talking. The time is the time. For instance, let's say your loan approval ended today and seller told you, yes, we'll give you 10 more days for loan approval. And you send them an addendum and it's 10 o'clock tonight and you don't get it signed. You need to cancel that contract. You could always reinitiate a contract, but you got to protect your buyer. Once they're losing their deposit, you can't go back in time. And who are they going to blame? They're going to blame you. I had one realtor not too long ago, she thought her client got denied on day 28. She thought the loan approvals period was 30 days. And actually it was 25 days. So guess what? The buyer blamed her for losing the deposit. Even though they signed the contract, they read the contract, they're always going to blame you, So you need to stay on top of those timelines. And if you see it's coming up, ask for an extension and make sure it's in writing, signed by both parties by the end of the inspection period. Because once you pass it, if they change their mind, even if they verbally told you, if they sent you a text, they sent you an email, you're done.
And not only that, I agree. Just because you requested an extension doesn't mean that they're going to grant you an extension.
Yeah.
Right? So at that time within the contract, I use this negotiation tactic, which is I deliver a bad news along with a good news. Let's say that I'm pretty confident that the property is going to appraise, and I'm working with the buyer, and the lender tells me, look, for this reason, let's say because they're still reviewing something with the taxes for the buyers, for this reason we're going to need a 2 weeks extension or a week extension. We're going to need more time, Brian. Please get us an extension. I tell the lender, okay, hold on. If I know that property is going to appraise, and I know that I'm going to be receiving that appraisal in the next 48 hours, I just hold on that information. Listen to me here. That's the beauty when you're a broker, when you are in between all these conversations. You don't have to deliver information right exactly when it comes to you. I hold on that information as long as we are within the loan commitment time. I wait for that appraisal. I wait for the great news that the property appraised. And then when I have the great news, I pick up the phone and call the listing agent. Hey, Sherry, I'm just calling you to let you know the great news. The property just appraised. My buyers are super happy, super excited. We got exactly the amount that we're offering the contract, and your seller is gonna get exactly what they're looking for. We're 80% there. Awesome. Now, I just spoke also with the lender. I just want to let you know that they're working on something with the buyers, we're almost there, and they're requesting, they think that they're gonna need a week extension. Is it okay if I send you that addendum? I already got them with great news, guys, and I told them that we appraised, we're 80% there, buyer is committed, lender is there, and then I take that good news and use it to deliver a not so good news. Does that make sense? 90% of the times, well, what is their job after that? Is picking up the phone and calling the seller. So instead of only calling the seller to let them know that this is gonna take a week or maybe 2 weeks longer than what they expected, they're also gonna call the seller and say the property appraised. You're gonna get exactly what you were looking for. So there's so many things, guys, in the process that could be good news and bad news. Just try to combine them and try to communicate everything exactly at the moment as you receive it. Sometimes I get bad news in a deal in the morning. Let's say that the lender, sometimes loan officers, they call me and tell me, oh my God, this is happening. I don't know what's gonna happen, the deal, blah, blah, blah. I give it some time, and then by the afternoon it's resolved. I didn't even have to deliver a bad news to my buyer. It got resolved. So until I have a final answer, I don't deliver bad or good news to anybody. That's the beauty of being in between. You can handle, you can use information when necessary. Does that make sense? That's a tactic right there.
Hello, may I ask a question?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, I can't put the camera. This is, by the way, all very helpful, at least for me, that I haven't been in this field for long.
Awesome. Thank you.
Question is, what is your advice to negotiate a contract when the seller is selling a house that they were going with a project? Basically, they were going to remodel the house. Everything has been approved. So, and they purchased the house the year prior. So the appraisal came lower than what they are selling it for right now. But the excuse or their justification is that, well, we are selling the house with the project. So we are handing over the remodeling, and then some of the zoning is approved. Is what they are lacking right now is the number to attach it with the GC, but obviously with the new owner, they will have to be done anyway again. So but the rest has already been approved, has already been done. So they invested money and they want to, kind of, that's their justification. Now the buyer comes and offers something below the price. Mm-hmm. How to negotiate that gap, because the buyer is afraid that the appraisal is not going to come. Yeah. To hit that, because you are buying what you are buying, not the future project.
Seller selling if they were so excited and they got the property. And
yes. They back off, not because of the house, but because of themselves, their health. So they said it's not for them. They decided just to don't do it.
It became a problem to them. Circumstances personally changed and it became a problem. Correct. Now they're trying to sell a problem, because what they're selling here is potential, not necessarily value. The property's value, whatever it currently is. You cannot sell whatever the property can be. Now, if you already pay for a contractor, or pay for an architect, or pay for permits and all of that, you can use that as a selling point, but it's very difficult to sell potential like that, because it's difficult. They just gotta take the loss. As the same way that the circumstances change, they gotta understand that it's gonna be a financial loss there. So there's nothing that you can do there, in my opinion.
I personally think rather than trying to convince the buyer why they should pay more, it's almost convincing your seller why they should take less, because
exactly.
it's like they're selling a problem. I mean, the work's not done, yes, it may be, but who knows what can happen? There could be other issues while they're, doing this thing. So it's really hard for even a buyer to estimate what it's gonna cost to complete. Cause with construction, there's always things that pop up. And who knows if the work they did so far has done the code and done the stuff, and if that might have to be redone. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
The buyer is already offering more than it was appraised the year prior. Obviously, there is no other guidance because the appraisal has not been done yet this year. But because they purchased it the year before, that's kind of the a guide to be like, okay, it could be a little bit more than that, but not much more. So okay, so the buyer, I guess, is doing the right thing right now.
Whatever they already spend on contractors and all that, that's the money that is probably gonna get lost. So if you already have somebody paying more than what it was and it's only been a year, they're already winning. So that's what you need to explain to your seller. That, yeah. But the fact that you have somebody interested, that's something that, again, negotiating, if you already have somebody interested, especially in such a specific situation like that, don't lose it. Try to put it together. But the conversation, the hard conversation there is make the seller, like Giovanni was saying, forget about the buyer. Make your seller understand that, not the buyer. Because your job is not try to convince the buyer here, in this case. So,
Correct. Thank you.
Any questions so far? What do you answer if you represent the seller, if you have the listing, and they ask you, do you have any offers? What do you answer to that? Do you say yes? Do you say no? Do you say the truth? Do you lie? Because you shouldn't be lying. Right? But what do you say if you don't have any offers? Or if you do? I can answer your questions without answering your questions. I receive that all the time. I mean, obviously, our job when representing the seller is to get the seller as much money as possible. And if the buyer's agent is asking if you have any other offers, because they want to know if they should be offering. Basically, the intrinsic question is, should I be offering the full asking or less? That's the question, right? When they ask you, do you have other offers? So if they ask you, do you have any other offers? If you don't have another offer, well, you can answer the question, but make them feel that you do. Yeah, no, I don't have an offer right now, but we have a lot of interest in the property and it's displaying super good. So most likely we'll get one very soon. That sounds way better than saying, no, I don't have any offers.
What if they ask you, how many offers do you have?
I said it. No, I don't have any offers right now, but the property is displaying very well and it has a lot of traction.
No. I mean, if you actually have 2 or 3 offers, then you actually say that you have 3 offers or the amount?
If in the case that you have offers, and they ask you how many offers, I tell them. Because at the end, all you need is one other offer to compete with their possible offer. That's all you need, one offer. It's not a set amount of offers. So if I do have that other offer, I don't have to disclose the information, right? But if it benefits my seller for any reason, I can disclose information about the offer to try to get them in a bidding war, right? So if they ask how many offers do you have and I only have one, I can tell them we have a very good one on the table. What's a very good one? That could mean so many things. But when I say I have a good one, agents immediately interpret that they have an asking or over asking. But I just said I had a good offer.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So legally, what are you allowed to ask about offers? Or are you allowed to ask anything?
Giovanni can go through this, but my understanding is this. You're allowed to ask anything you want. Now, if you are legally representing a party, buyer or seller, you have a fiduciary responsibility. And you're not allowed to disclose a lot of the information. You're allowed to ask. You're not allowed to answer in certain cases, in certain occasions. But the essence here, and unless the law changed since I learned it on school when I got my license almost 10 years ago, as long as you are, what would be the word, fighting for your sellers or buyers' best interest, you can negotiate. You have the freedom to use words and articulate an argument to try to get them the best deal possible. Just to give you an example, I work with an investor. They keep me very busy. They give me a lot of business. He doesn't care what I say, what I don't say every time that I negotiate a deal. As a matter of fact, all the time, I negotiate deals in front of him. He doesn't care what I have to say, just to get him the best offers possible, the best deal possible. So that's how you need to treat it when you're working with your sellers and when you're working with your buyers. And what I mean doesn't care, I'm not saying lying. That's a different thing. It's just using words. Again, using the same examples. Do you have offers? No, I don't, but the property is displaying very well. It's just a matter of time. That sounds way better than saying, no, I don't. So you can use words to your advantage. Any other questions? That's a great question, by the way.
How did you learn to be so comfortable and fluid in how you approach these things and negotiate? How do we teach ourselves some of this same confidence that you're displaying in just general conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm an introvert by nature, and I wasn't born like this.
I can't answer that. It's practice. And yeah, just like Brian said, like I've known Brian since he started. He's not the same way. It's just, gaining confidence in yourself by, and I just remember Brian used to role play in the mornings, things like that. It's just by doing it over and over again where it just becomes second nature. I mean, just even like myself. I mean, it's kind of funny when I was in college, I used to be so scared a teacher would call on me. It would scare me to talk in front of people. I could talk in front of thousands of people now. It doesn't bother me one bit, but it's just by practice, by doing it over and over again. So just like even if, find people you could practice with, whether people in your brokerage or whatever. But the more you do it, the better you get. It really is. There's nothing like,
And Giovanni can attest to that. He literally saw me from the very beginning. I joined a brokerage. I started cold calling. That's how I thought that I needed to do. Just a backstory. I moved to this country in 2015. English is not even my first language. I'm from the Dominican Republic. So if I have an accent now, back then it was even worse. So I moved to this country. I didn't even know anybody here. So I had to learn everything, even the language, start from zero. I didn't know anybody. A lot of you guys were born here. You grew up, maybe you went to high school. You have relationships that you can even start forming and talking to. I didn't even have any of that. So you have to answer the question and going along with Giovanni said, you have to have a lot of conversations. That's what is gonna makes you feel comfortable and give you the practice. I have an advantage now. I close a lot of deals, so I have all these conversations on a daily basis. It only took me 15-20 minutes to write down these pointers because this is what I do every day. So I didn't have to prepare. All I'm doing is talking about what I deal on a daily basis with agents. So yes, but you will say, well, I'm newer. I don't have many deals and many introductions. That's why you have maybe role-playing groups, and you can role-play scripts, how to talk to buyers, how to talk to sellers, how to get appointments, expire listings, FISBOs. If you want to do open houses, put yourself in front of people so you can have these conversations. Practice with agents. But the more you repeat, the more you learn, for sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're negotiating a listing agreement with the seller, and it now comes up to compensation, do you recommend either sitting down with the seller and going over the whole contract point by point by point, or letting the seller look over the contract and then just asking you questions about points that he has? How do you sort of go ahead?
One of the things that you gain with the experience, or at least I will suggest you guys do, is train yourself. Try to learn personality types. There's a great personality test. It's called the DISC profile. You can take it. You can learn what are the 4 different personality types. There's one that is called that are C's. that are very into details. So if you notice that your seller, he wants to really know and understand the contract, and he doesn't mind taking the time, he's asking a lot of questions, then with those sellers, you want to invest the time and go over the entire contract. If they're high D, which is drivers, they just want to go to the point, they just want a summary, then you have to wrap it up and just give the basics. So it's a case by case, it depends on what you're talking with. But even if you don't know who you're talking to, you don't have to go through the entire thing. Just give the most important information and let them ask you everything else. That's with every interaction. I feel I still come across agents, even when showing properties, they want to just show me that that's a kitchen, that that's a bathroom. Like, there's just a lot of details that people think that is part of the job, and it's not. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you.
So the most important things, even on the contract, when you're explaining the contract to the buyer or the seller, is you show the lines, sellers and buyers. This is the purchase price. This is the escrow. Those are the important things. Time of acceptance, closing day. Look how I even know the contract. Closing day in order. And then what's next? The inspection period. And then after the inspection period, if you go to the contract, there's like, I don't know, 5 pages in between. The ones that we don't read, right? That we don't read no more, that we know that they're there. And then we go to additional terms. Look how I went through the entire 12-page contract in 7 items. So that's how I explain the contract. You're gonna have sellers that are gonna read the entire contract and they're gonna ask you stuff in between, or you gotta know what's that and just be ready to answer. So, any other questions, guys? Final thoughts that I write down here. Guys, I really want to stress this one, because if I ever come across a deal with you guys, especially in this new generation, I feel older every time I say that. I'm only 31. But this new generation, they want to negotiate deals, texting and emailing. Just pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and call. If you're working with the buyer, if you're working with the seller, especially in those first interactions, I can understand if we wrap it up in negotiation, if we're going back and forth with a number or with a term. If we're finishing that, maybe you can finish it with a text or an email. But those first interactions, just pick up the call. Don't text me, my buyer is so thinking about offering this much. Call me and tell me why. Give me the reasons. Or if it's on the seller side, whatever it is, because through the phone, and that's the advantage that I can have against those agents that are negotiating deals through text and email, is that I take the time to pick up the phone and get more clarity and understanding on where this other party is. If you're only sending an email, there's just so much information that you can gain from that. Just pick up the phone. Any other questions? I think, Dina, you had another one?
Yes, it refers to agency. Because we're a transaction broker in the state of Florida, and now we could again have both sides. On the listing agreement, it states, at least in my company, it states sort of vaguely that we can get both sides. How do we explain, or is it important to explain to a seller the whole essence of this?
So here's the thing. I'm with EXP, and EXP, I don't know if you knew these guys, but EXP came up with their own listing agreement. We can still use the regular Florida standard, but EXP came up with one where they literally have 2 pieces of documents. They have the listing agreement, which doesn't no longer includes buyer's agent's compensation there. Look how they flip. Oh, yeah. So it doesn't include buyer compensation there. It's only the compensation between seller to me, listing agent. There's nothing there saying about buyer's agent. Why they did that? Because they want to avoid future liabilities, and I think it makes total sense, and I choose to use it because they want to avoid future liabilities and have to revisit this conversation and with another lawsuit again about compensations and stuff like that. So what I'm doing is I'm using EXP's form, which they made it open to the public. I can even send you a link if you want to use it and handle it that way, you can. And I negotiate my commission only. You, Dina, seller, are gonna pay me to sell your property, and I'm gonna offer all these services. We already had that conversation and we agree on 3%. Then I'm gonna explain to you, Dina, why it's important to offer some sort of compensation, why it will put you in a better position against your competition, against your neighbor. And if you're willing to offer compensation, we can offer in the form of a concession, and then I bring another form. So there's no confusion. If you as the seller say no, I don't want to offer anything, let the buyer pay for the buyer's agent commission, then I don't bring that other form. And we already have an agreement just between you and me. There's no confusion there. So that's how I'm choosing to handle in this, using EXP form, because it makes total sense and it avoids confusion like the one that you're saying. The only extra thing that EXP form has is in the event that the buyer comes unrepresented. And I get to negotiate that with the seller for an extra commission. Okay, Mr. Seller, it's gonna be 3%, I'm gonna represent you. But what if the buyer doesn't come with a buyer's agent? This is how much I charge for that, because I will have to get double the work, and I can charge an extra %. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome, those are great questions. But I can send you the link. I'm gonna drop my user in the chat for my social media. I think you can find me the same way on Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, I see a lot of the bigger brokerages are actually asking their clients to their agents to do that, to have the seller being the one paying the commission, not them. Like actually I met with someone from Douglas Elliman the other day, and that's what they're requiring as well.
Yeah. The cleaner the conversation it is and separate, the better. I'm noticing that, to avoid liabilities for yourself, and know how to navigate better these. Any other conversations?
May I ask about this? So, but you don't want to be the agent that doesn't have a bias commission. So how does this take care of that? I mean, if you only doing the listing commission and you're like, okay, well, let the buyer figure that out, the buyer's agent, would not make people not deal with it? How do you deal with it then? So if I call you up and say, do you offer a buyer's agent commission? What do you say at that point?
If I don't have, if the seller doesn't offer any, unfortunately not. But that's where the negotiation part comes from. That's another thing too. The settlement allows for us agents, and that's my understanding, to split commission with the buyer's agent. If I negotiate at 3%, it's mine. I can share that with the other agent outside of the MLS. I cannot post anything on the MLS. But outside of the MLS, I can tell the other agent, look, the seller is not offering compensation to you, the buyer, but from my compensation, I can credit you this much. That's allowed, right? Now, if I don't want to share commission from my commission, but the seller is not offering commission either, then the answer is no compensation. And then it's the buyer's agent job to secure the commission with the buyer. But to your point, and that's what I was saying earlier, you don't want to become the agent that doesn't offer compensation, that is known like that. Your job is to sell the property, and you only get paid the 3% that you work hard negotiating if the deal closes. So work out the numbers if you have to. Revisit the conversation with your seller if you have to. Mr. Seller, I know that you said that you don't want to offer compensation. I got like 10 agents calling me asking if you offer compensation. And when I said no, they didn't even show the property. I strongly suggest and believe that it's better if you offer some sort of compensation. You can revisit the conversations. Does that make sense?
So if you sign a listing agreement with the 3% for you as a listing agent, can you amend that later?
Amend that how?
Say to to include the bias listing agent commission? Are you allowed to do that? Like, say after a month, you have people calling you and you saying no bias commission, and people are not coming to see your listing, right? Could you go back to the seller and say, yeah, we need to add this?
Yeah, well, just real quick, Alex, I think the 1000%, that's really, I think is exactly what's going to happen. I think, the way the media makes it sound right now is that sellers don't have to pay and buyers have to pay. So you're going to have some sellers who insist on not paying and everything. And then once they see that they're listing it, not offering nothing, and they're getting very few showings, and everyone else in their neighborhood who's offering money is selling, they're probably going to come to the realization that, okay, I do need to offer something. So yeah, as an agent, if you see you're not getting the proper amount of showings, you definitely should bring it back up with your seller and try to get them to offer, because I personally think if they're offering money, they're going to get the highest price and they're going to sell it the quickest.
Yes, 100%. Don't get fixed on one conversation. You can always get creative. You can always revisit conversations. Get creative, and that's the thing. That's the thing, guys. As a buyer's agent, we had it so easy. I got to a point where I show properties, and I didn't even look at what commission they were offering. I'm sure that most of you guys did too. I didn't even go at the last at the bottom of the page of the listing to see what commission they were offering. Why? Because we were used to every listing was offering anywhere between 2 to 3%. And we were okay with that, right? It didn't even bother to do that. But now that it disappeared from the MLS, we have to call and ask. But here's the thing, even if I'm the listing agent, let's say, how do you pronounce it, Evona?
Yes.
Evona. So let's say that I have a listing and for some reason I'm not offering. And you call me, hey, do you offer any compensation? And let's say that it's been on the market for a little while now and it's not selling. I can tell you, look, Evona, the seller is saying no to offering any commission. But if that's going to be an issue, I would suggest just put it in the contract if you have an interested buyer. Just put it in the contract. You can put a credit, you can put a commission in the contract. That's actually when it starts being valid. You can do all of that. So just simply by making that comment, look at how I'm changing perspective. And it went from you basically saying, okay, I won't send you an offer because you're not offering commission, by me telling you, just submit the offer, put it in there, and let me just talk to my seller. So all of that, it's just a matter of if it's changing the switch and thinking, I'm gonna get paid. I just need to figure it out where the money's coming from.
And doing it over the phone, right? Having this conversation, that's all legal before the offer is signed. Because like you said, like going back and forth and crossing out the contracts. So a lot of this is okay to have it on a phone with the agent.
That's one reason why I said what I said earlier. Just pick up the phone and have conversations. And even if by any chance you say something that is not right, just because you didn't know, well, it was a verbal conversation at the end. In the worst case scenario that you said something just because you didn't know. Does that make sense? Now I'm telling you, yes. Get your information right. But once you get in paper, that's what's solid. That's what it's gonna be at the end. But that's why you have to pick up the phone and it's like, hey, I have this interested buyer, Evona, and you have a listing and they really like that property. How can we figure it out? And especially in this market, I have a couple of listings that are not moving. I'm gonna tell you how we can figure it out. We're gonna work together because you're the one bringing the buyer.
Thank you.
Final thoughts, guys. Questions. I think, Dina, you have another one?
What do you say to a seller when negotiating with the seller about how much commission to offer the buyer? I have a seller, when we were talking about making it 3%, he said, well, maybe we should do 2% because if I give it 3%, it looks like I'm desperate.
I mean, my answer right now will be, well, it's always been like that. And no seller looked like it's desperate. All the opposite. if your competition at the moment is not offering that or less, the agent is going to be more inclined to go with your property or try to sell your property. All the opposite.
If I actually saw a realtor offering 2%, I'm thinking that's going to be a harder person to deal with now.
Yeah.
In my opinion, rather than thinking someone offering 3% is desperate. You know, I look at it the other way. I think the one offering less would be the one, okay, this person might be a problem. They're going to be like nitpicking everything. They're going to be.
In these conversations, you can always frame it in a way where you make them put themselves in the shoes of the buyer or the buyer's agent. Mr. Seller, let's say that you're the buyer's agent, change your hat to the buyer's agent, and you come to our property and we're offering 3%, and that day you show 5 other properties and the other ones are offering between 2% to 2.5, and you're the only one that offers 3%, and your buyer only is interested in 2 properties, one at 2.5, one 3%. Which one, as the buyer's agent, it's better? You think it's better for you as the buyer's agent and for your buyer, because he has to come up with less money on closing. Look how I'm having the same conversation, but I'm making them put themselves in the shoes so they have no other choice to say, like, obviously the one that is offering more. So they get to see it. And the reason I did that here is because sometimes they don't take the time to internalize what they're saying. When they say something like, but that will make me look more desperate. No, Mr. Seller, all the opposite. That will get your house sold faster. Isn't that the goal, Mr. Seller?
Let me ask you, in terms of knowing how much commission a seller is offering for our competition, in other words, my listing is going to be a condo, and in the complex, there's a lot of other condos listed. There's a glut. So, instead of calling up to find out what is the commission offered by my competitors, is there any place lately, whether it's on Zillow or emails or advertising, that I could sort of get a gist of finding out what my competition, the commission, is offering from these other listings?
Not for now. I'm curious to see if, I don't know if you wanna, that is one thing about a centralized service outside of the MLS that we agents can come up with, where we can post compensation. I don't know if that's going to be something that it will be even entertained.
I mean, yes, supposedly people can list it on their own websites and stuff, but at the time you're doing all this searching, call the people.
Yeah.
I mean, just call. The time you're gonna be like looking for different websites, looking for the company's thing, hoping they have it listed, looking on their social media, hoping they're showing it. Just call. I mean, they're either gonna tell you what they're offering or they're not. It's very simple.
Remember that I told you at the very beginning that I called even before showing any property, I called to ask if the property is available. And in the same phone call, I just asked, do you offer any compensation? I already have the information even before. Ediani.
Buenos dias, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Buenos dias.
Wonderful. I agree with you guys as far as contacting people via phone and using any potential way of communication. I was able to send an offer 2 days ago, and most of the listing agents that I got in touch with were very pleasant. They answered all the questions that I had. They disclosed how much the sellers were given for compensation. And I think it's just how you structure your ways of communicating with other people and your attitude towards them that gives you the best results. I pretty much use a format that I texted everybody before I went to show the properties. I was driving from here all the way to Port St. Lucie, so I wanted to have some assurance that my time helping this buy. First of all, I negotiated the 3% with the buyer from the get-go. And I explained to him, these are the situations. If the seller is giving compensation, then don't worry about paying anything. If there's a deficiency between what you agree with my broker compensation wise with me, then you will be responsible for that little gap. And it ended up going for a 2.5 compensation. He's only paying 0.5. And praise the Lord, we were able to put the house, or at least I submitted the offer. I am about to get the response from the listing agent. We negotiated, and this thing seems like it's going to work out. So, and that is a human touch. I love the fact that you mentioned it to call people. I got a chance to talk to the listing agent yesterday. He shared some things about his daughter with me. We connected, and that created some favor, from, I would call it favor from the, relationship type of point of view. So call people, get to know the listing agent a little bit. There might be an offer out there versus your offer, and just connecting with that listing agent and making them feel like you are taking the time. It definitely makes a difference.
100%. That's good. It's true. At the end, remember, guys, you can put whatever you want. Don't be afraid to ask. Rich people, they're known because they don't mind asking. They don't mind asking about money, business, whatever they need. That's why they're rich. So don't be afraid to ask money. Put it in the contract and negotiate and pick up the phone and ask questions. So that's a great, thank you for that, Ediani, right? And one thing that you mentioned too, it's have systems in place. For example, in my case, I have a Maya system that helps. And let's say that I'm going to take my buyer out. I already have the properties that I'm going to show them. And then I tell them, reach out to the agents to find out if they're offering the compensation. And she texts a message or email a message to them so we can have that in there, right? Because you want to know that information before putting the contract in. That's one way. Another thing is having a website, like Giovanni was saying. You can post compensation, just you cannot post it on the MLS, right? And it has to be, according to the rule, it has to be 2 clicks away from the MLS. So you cannot, if you put your website and your compensation is on your website and you click, for compensation, or whatever you put, like for more information about anything, whatever, concessions, click in my website, it has to be 2 clicks away. That's the rule. So take that in consideration. You cannot post compensation on the MLS, and if you are posting it somewhere outside of the MLS and referencing the MLS, it has to be 2 clicks away.
Don't try to be sneaky about it. Just do it right. There's no, like, someone I saw in the chat before posted that some people are putting, let's say if they're offering 2%, the list house for $500,000 and $2. Don't do that. I mean, there's going to be what's called testers. They're going to go through the MLS and look for people that are violating it. So do you want to be the one who gets fined? You're the one who gets sued? Do you want to be the one who gets your MLS privilege taken away? Just do it right. I mean, seriously, it's not, you see how much money these brokerages paid out. This is not a game. They don't want to get sued again. Don't like, these, I've seen people do the pictures in the mowing the lawn. Just do it right. If someone calls you what you're offering, and you move on. It's like it's not hard to talk to people.
That part, I know that we're gonna get creative as agents, and it's gonna be like a standard way of doing things. For example, I had a class for my coaching clients, and I brought a transaction coordinator, and I wanted to bring her because she has a title company too. Her name is Evelyn, and the reason I wanted to bring her is because she not only handles my transactions, she handles transactions for other agents from different brokerages at any levels of production. She gets to see what other agents are doing, right? And she was sharing stuff like, well, first of all, in your listings, you can have the information about the compensation. You can have the commission agreement, copies of the commission sign agreement of whatever compensation your seller is offering, and have copies on your listing. That's one way to let them know if compensation is being offered. That's outside of the MLS. You set standard operation procedures. My assistant, she knows each property, how much commission we're offering, and she, every time that somebody asks, she answers verbally and through text. All you have to do, we just have an extra step of asking, you know? It's just asking a question. And you could be through text, it could be a call, as long as it's outside of the MLS. It's a simple question.
Yeah. Any last questions?
Yes, Tina.
Okay, when it comes to, when do you recommend we ask the seller's agent to put in writing what the commission is that the seller is offering? When is the time to ask them to put in writing?
At the listing presentation. All those conversations, it's at the listing presentation.
No,
Yeah.
what I mean is for the buyer, when the buyer calls up, pardon me for, I didn't explain this. When the buyer calls up and wants to make a showing appointment,
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
do we need to give the buyer's agent confirmation of what the commission is that the seller is offering?
Whenever they ask, because remember, it's buyer's agent's job to put it in the contract. So if they never ask and they don't put it, it's on them. They submit an offer without putting it there, it's on them. So whenever they ask, you let them know. And sometimes maybe there's agents that they won't even care of asking if you offer commission or not. It's gonna be part of their standard procedure to put it in the offer.
Yeah.
And as a listing agent, if you don't want to ask me and you show my listing and your buyers likes it, okay, no problem. And you decide to put it in the contract, then I'll find out in the contract how much commission you're expecting and you would like. And then my seller decides if he want to pay that, if you want to counter, or simply say no to it. So to answer your question, whenever people ask, if they don't ask, we'll see what they put on the contract.
Thank you.
Yeah, because that's another thing. You could just put it like basically what I'm telling people, if someone's offering 0 and you still want to try to get the house, put it in the contract. But this offer is contingent on seller signing the attached seller compensation agreement, paying buyer's agent 3% or whatever. So they know
Yeah.
that's what you're looking for. And if they agree to it and they sign it, the buyer's agent knows they're protected and they're getting paid that commission.
I think all of these change with the settlement came at the perfect time. And let me tell you why. Because we are on a buyer's market, right? There's way more buyers. There's more and more sellers out there than buyers, qualified buyers, right? So the buyers have the leverage in a lot of the cases. So we are in a market where a lot of sellers have to pay credits, compensation, concessions, and all of that to move their listings and inventory. And this just came in at a time where that's what all we need to ask is concessions and compensations. So we have the leverage right now. If you're a buyer's agent, even with this change, it's so easy to navigate this conversation in this market. Now, if you were in the market that we were in 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, where you had a line of 50 people at an open house, then that would have been different. Because if I have a listing and I have 50 people and 15, 20 offers like we were getting, then I didn't have to pay compensation. My seller didn't have to pay compensation. And most likely, even if you put a compensation in the offer, my counter was going to be 0, But now it's the buyers have the leverage. So it's an easier conversation for agents. So it came at the right timing. It was better for this to happen now than 2-3 years ago. Final questions? Hey, Diani, I don't know if you're raising your hand. There you go.
Hi, thank you so much for your time and sharing all these wise suggestions to us.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. This was very good. I'm gonna drop again. I don't know if earlier got sent. A lot of people were writing in the chat. I'm sorry I didn't get to go through them. Again, I'm more of a face-to-face, so I'm sorry if you were trying to text me. So I just put my user there. If you guys want to follow me on social media, if you want to reach out, if you want to look at my content on YouTube too, happy to help. If you want to join me, I coach agents. I have coaching calls. I have agents through EXP and organization. If you want to talk about that, happy to help.
Yeah, well, once again, thank you so much, Brian.